So now that we've got the login system set up, we're going to create the activity for the rider to be able to view their own location and request an Uber. So let me show you how I think that's going to work. So first off, we're going to need to adapt the map to the user's location. So as the user moves, the map should update and show a new location for the user. And then on top of the map, we're going to have a button and a text view. And the text view will be blank by default, but then when we tap request Uber, it will change to finding Uber driver, and it will save a request over on pass. And the way I'd recommend storing those requests is in a requests class, which will have a requester username and a driver username. And obviously we'll only fill in the requester username at the moment. We'll work on the driver in the next video. And then when they request that, they can then cancel their Uber if they want to, and that will then update on pass and the request will be deleted. There we go. So that's what we're after. One slight thing to warn you about is that it's not simple to create buttons and text views on top of a map fragment. So what I'd recommend doing is putting the map fragment inside a relative layout, and then you'll be able to add the button and the text view as necessary. And you'll need to do that using the XML because it won't allow you to do it using drag and drop. So that's the major challenge, the major thing that we haven't done before in this one, but I think you can probably figure it out. If not, obviously feel free to watch me give it a shot. But best of luck. Hope it goes well. All right, hope that went well. I'm going to start by creating the new activity for our rider. So I'm going to go over to Java and control click or right click on Windows and create a new activity. And this, oh no, it's a new Google Maps activity is what we're after. So this is going to show the user's location. So I'm going to call it your location. And the title will be your location. We don't want a back button from here, so I'm not going to have a parent, and we'll just click finish to set that up. All right, so now we need to add our Google Maps key. We've done that before. So let's jump over to Chrome to set that up. So there we go. The usual, put in that link, and then we'll create a new project for it. And then it takes a little while for that to happen. You can see it's saved what I did last time. There we go. And then go to credentials and create. There we go. So copy that key. Obviously, don't copy mine, but copy your own. And then we'll just paste it in there, as we've done before. Now we've got an interesting error here. Could not find property compile on all.gradle API. All sorts of nastiness there. Let's have a look at the file and see what's gone wrong. So I think the issue here is this. We've got compile here in one of our Gradle files. Remember, the Gradle scripts are what puts your app together, essentially. And I think what's happened is when we added the Google Maps activity, that added Google Play services in the compile list, but it did it in such a way that it broke the line breaks here. So to fix that, we should just be able to put the line breaks back in and then recompile, and that should work fine. Okay, it's not underlined now, so that looks promising. So just try again, and then it will do the Gradle sync, and that should work. All right, so now we have our Google Maps activity. That's over here. So in our layout, there it is, and it's also in Java as well. Oh, we've got a few folders there. There we go. Something went wrong with my synchronizing, I think. But you can see we've got rid of that error now at least, which is good. So first off, let's set up our redirecting to the rider activity here. We're going to want to do that in two places. So when they've just tapped the button, and also when they start the app and they're already set up with a rider or driver setting. So I'm going to create a little method to do it. So public void, and I'll just call it redirect user. And that's going to first off check to see if pass user dot get current user dot get and then rider or driver, and we want to check whether that equals rider, and if it does, we'll log them in to the your location activity. Remember, when you're comparing two strings, you need to use dot equals. If you try and use a double equals sign, that won't work. So to do the redirect, it's just the usual intent I to create our intent, and that's going to be a new intent within our application context, and we're heading to your location dot class, and then we start the activity. Okay, so we want to do that in two places. We'll do it here, and we'll do it here as well. All right. So if everything's now set up correctly, we should, as soon as we run the app, get redirected to the Maps page. And I'll say it once again, make sure you're running this on API 21 with Google Play all set up. And if you're not sure how to do that, then go back to where we introduced Maps and you'll see how to do that. And there we go. We've got our map and the just default location at 0, 0 there. All right, so that's all looking good. The next stage is to zoom in to the user's current location. So you have to cast your minds back to how we do that. First off, let's just check in the manifest. You can see that we've already got the permission to access the user's location. That was added automatically with the Google Maps API. So we're all good there. So we just need the code to do that. So first off, we need to implement location listener to allow us to listen for the user's location, and then that will request for us to implement the methods associated with location listener. There we go. So you'll remember these. We've got on location changed, on status changed, on provider enabled, and on provider disabled. So I'm actually only going to work with on location changed here. And all we want to do is update the map with the user's current location. So we do that using mmap dot animate camera, and we use camera update factory and new lat lung zoom. So that allows us to put the latitude, the longitude, and the zoom level in. We put the latitude and longitude first, and we do that using a new lat lung, and we're going to create that from this location here, from the latitude and longitude of it. So we use location dot get latitude for the latitude, and location dot get longitude for the longitude. Then we want the zoom level, which I suggest to use something like 10. Is about reasonable for this. And then we want to add a marker. We've actually got the code for that here, so why not use that? So I'm going to cut that because we don't need it there. And then instead of new lat lung 0, 0, we're going to want what we had here. So new lat lung with the latitude and longitude. Let's pop that in. And we'll change the title to your location. All right, so that will update whenever the location changes. We do need to set up our location listener first. So we'll do that in onCreate and also up here where we'll create our global variables that we'll need. So first off, we'll create our location manager. And then we'll create our provider string, which keeps track of what we're getting the location from. So in onCreate, you may or may not remember, we use location manager and then we cast it to a location manager and we get it from the system service and then context.location service. So that sets up the location manager for us, and then we set the provider using location manager.get best. Best provider using empty criteria, i.e. we're using the standard criteria, and we'll return anything, not just what's available. Excellent. And then we'll switch on the location manager using request location updates, and we'll do that with the provider and minimum distance change of 400 meters. Minimum time of 400 milliseconds, minimum distance change of 1 meter, and this for our location listener, i.e. the your location class. Okay, and just to be friendly on battery, we'll put that into the onResume method as well, and then we'll add an onPause method. There we go, where we'll stop looking for the user's location. So location manager dot remove updates. And finally, we'll add the code to access the last known location in onCreate and zoom the map as soon as they load up that activity. So we do that using location to create our location, and then location manager dot get last known location using the provider. And then we'll just do a quick check to see if location is not null. Then what we want to do is update the camera and update the map. So we want to do exactly these two things. I think probably simpler here just to copy those over, but you're very welcome to create a method for those if you like. All right, so all of that should now center the map on the user's location and put a little marker exactly where they are. Now, while that's compiling, I'm going to set up my terminal. Remember, this is how we actually update the location of our emulator. If you're on Windows, you can do this with the command line or using CMD. And we use telnet localhost and the number at the top of that window there, which is the port number 5554. There we go. And then to update the location, we use something like geofix, and then we pick our latitude and longitude. I'll try 1010, and there we go. Zooms in very nicely. Somewhere in Africa, not sure exactly where, doesn't really matter. All right, great. So that will now follow the user around. If, for example, we change it to geofix 10.1, 10.1, that will move slightly there. That's pointed out that we do need to remove the existing markers. So let's just add some code to do that. We don't need to do it here because there won't be any markers when we first load the activity, but we do need to do it here. You may or may not remember how to do that. Let's do a quick Google. Android, remove all markers from Google Map. There we go. That top result looks pretty relevant. And that first answer hasn't got an obvious single answer there. So actually use clear on your Google Map. Ah, perfect. We know how to access the Google Map. That's just mmap and then .clear. Excellent. I'm pretty confident that will work, and we'll check it next time we run the app, so we won't do a separate run just for that. All right. Now, our next step is to edit the layout of the Your Location activity to put a button on it so that the user can request a Uber. Now, if you've tried doing this, you might realize that we can't just drag things directly onto the map. So what we actually need to do is put the map within, or the fragment, I should say, within a layout. So at the moment, the map goes directly onto the device screen. Now, if we try and add a relative layout, we can't do that directly either. So what I'm going to do to solve the problem is to add it using code. I'm going to grab that code from my main activity. Oops, sorry, not from the main activity there, the activity main.xml, which has the code for a relative layout within it. So let's just grab the XML there and remove what we don't want or what we don't need. So back over to your location.xml. So surrounding the fragment, we're now going to have a relative layout, which will end at the end of that. So let's get rid of the context there, and I actually want to have 0 padding everywhere, but I'll update that over here. So we don't want this nasty white border around the edge. So let's just select our relative layout and remove all of that padding. There we go. Lovely. So we're as before, but we've now got this relative layout. So if we try adding a button to the screen, we can now do it because it will now do it into the relative layout. So I'm going to put my button at the bottom right of the screen. There we go. I'm going to give it a bit of a margin so it's not exactly in the bottom right. So let's try something like 20 dps. That looks good. And I'm going to call it request Uber. And the ID will be request Uber as well. There we go. And while we're here, we'll add an onClick method of request Uber. And we'll also add a plain text view in the bottom left, like that, which again is going to have some padding. And this is going to be where we'll give the user messages about what's happening with their Uber. So let's move it up a little bit more this time. So let's try 30 dps. That looks good. And 10 dps from the left. And I'm going to make it a little bit darker just so it's more visible over the map. So text color. And let's try that. Okay. So I'll call it info text view. And just so that we know what we're using this for the moment, I'll have something like your Uber is on its way. So that's the sort of thing that we're going to put there. So just do a quick run of that just to make sure that those are displaying as we want them to. While that's running, let's just set up our request Uber code over in your location. So we'll do it at the top here. Public void request Uber. That's going to be called by the button. And for the moment, we'll log my app Uber requested. And in fact, let's run that so that we can check that the button's all integrated as well. Here we go. So that's looking good. And let's just tap the request Uber button and check that that's appeared here. Uber requested. Wonderful. All looking good so far. So now we need to think a little bit about how we're actually going to manage these requests in Parse. So let's go back over to Parse and think about what we're going to need. I think we're going to need a separate class to manage all of our requests. So I'm going to add a class, and this is going to be a requests class. And it's going to be pretty simple. I think all we need for our requests is the username of the requester, and then later on the username of the driver. And given that any driver and any user can only have one request going at once, then that will be a unique mapping from the requester to the driver. So let's add our columns now. I know we don't need to, but it'll hopefully make it slightly clearer how this class is going to work. So I'll call this requester username. I'm not sure if I like the word requester, but you get the idea. And let's have another column, driver username, which will be a string as well. Again, as I mentioned last time, usernames not necessarily the best thing to use. Probably IDs in a production app would be better, but it's a little bit clearer what's going on if we work with usernames. So I'm going to stick with those for teaching purposes. All right, so now we've got our class. We should be able to create one whenever the request button is tapped. So we'll need to create a new Parse object, which I'll call request. That's going to be a new Parse object with a class of requests. Just make sure I've got that exactly right. Yep. And then all we're going to save at the moment is the requester username, which will of course be the current username. So request.put and then requester username. And to get the current username, we use parse user dot, oops, not class, dot get current user dot get username. Now we're also going to need to be able to write to this from different accounts, because we're going to need to update this with the information about the driver when the driver accepts this request. So we're going to need to change the ACL to allow us to do that. So let's create a new parse ACL. And this is going to allow public write access. So set public write access. There we go. And then we'll take our request and set the ACL to the ACL that we've just created. So that should request public write access. Then we save that on Parse. So request.save in background, and we'll need a new save callback. And we'll just do a quick check for an exception. And if there isn't one, then we need to tell the user that that's been accepted. So I want to update a couple of things here. I want to update the button to say cancel Uber, and I want to update this message here as well. So let's do the message first. So info text view is what we're working with. So let's create a text view to work with that. So it'll be publicly available, and then we'll set it up in onCreate as usual. So text view and find view by ID, resources.id.info text view. Okay, so we're going to update now info text view .set text, and I'll just call it finding Uber driver. And we'll also update the button. So where are we? Over here. Button ID is request Uber. So let's go and do the same thing for that. It's a button this time. I think I'll call it request Uber button. And exactly the same. Request Uber button is going to be a button. Find view by ID r.id.request Uber. Oh yeah, it's just request Uber. All right, and then we use request Uber button .set text, and then cancel Uber. Now, obviously, we'll need to change this code from requesting to cancelling if we're in the cancel Uber state. So we'll set that up in a moment, but I just want to make sure that this is all working okay before we do that. So we should now be able to request Uber, and this text here should update to finding Uber driver, and this should change to cancel Uber, and we should have the request going on to pass as well. While we're here, while I think of it, I'm just going to get rid of the text. The default your Uber is on its way, because we don't really want that to appear at all initially. Here we go. So let's tap request Uber. Yep, that looks really promising. And let's jump over and refresh our data browser. Looks like we've got our request. There it is with the requester username. Oh, we do have this strange ACL setting though, master key only. We don't want that, and I think what I've done is, very stupidly, I've used get public right access rather than set public right access. So let's just set that to true. And just try that again. I'm going to delete that request. And let's just create a new one. So let's just try that again. Here we go. So request Uber again. That text view didn't appear, which was great. And Uber requested, all looking good. Let's just make sure the ACL is set correctly. Public right. Fantastic. I think there's one more thing. We are actually going to need to set public read separately as well to true. Okay, but we don't need to test that one. We'll test it next time. All right, so we're almost there. We just need to set up the code to cancel an Uber if necessary. So what we'll have is we'll have a Boolean request active, which is initially false when there's no request active. And then when they tap the request Uber button, all this happens if request active is false. There we go. Now, if request active is not false, then we need to do the opposite. So here, let's set request active to be true. So this time, if we're trying to remove any active requests, we essentially need to look for all of the requests where the requester username is equal to the current username and delete them. So we'll need to do a pass query for that on pass objects. We'll call it query. And this is going to be a new pass query with a class of requests. And we're going to want to add a key for where equal to, and we want to find where the requester username, make sure I've got that exactly right. Yep, requester username is equal to the current username. So pass user dot get current user dot get username. And that's all we need. So we want to then find those in background with a new find callback. There we go, and we'll do our usual check. So if we've got no exceptions, and if list.size, oh sorry, it's not list, it's objects dot size is greater than 0, then we want to loop through the objects and delete them all. So for object, which is going to have a type of pass object, we'll call it object, and we want to get all the object in objects. And then we want to delete it. We haven't actually deleted anything from pass before. So let's find out how to do it. Android pass delete object. Okay, we've got something in Stack Overflow here. Okay, it looks like we can just use delete in background there. But worth just having a look at the question there. Yeah, it looks like the problem was not that delete in background. Okay, so let's give that a try. Object dot delete in background. And we don't need a callback for that, I think. It'll just happen when it happens. So then we'll check, well, we don't need to check anything. We'll just set the texts back to what they were before. And actually we can do that before the query. So we'll set the text of the info text view to Uber cancelled. And we'll set this back to request Uber. And we'll set request active is equal to false. There we go. So this should now check to see whether there is a request active, and if there is, then it will cancel it and update all of the buttons and text views as necessary, as well as changing request active to false. And if there isn't, then it will create a new one and save it onto pass. Alright, so let's take a look. First off, let's just delete that existing request. Here we go. So let's do our request just to make sure that that worked. That all looked pretty good. We've now got our request there. If we then cancel it, then that goes immediately back to cancelled. That goes back to request, and the request has gone. Fabulous. Just to be absolutely sure, if we request Uber again, the request comes back. Wonderful. So let's just cancel that one, keep things tidy. And that's now as far as we can go on the user or the rider interface. In the next video, we'll see how we can allow the drivers to log in and view the nearby requests and then respond to them if they want to. See you there.